All right. Hello, hello, hello. Facebook reminded me to go live, and I'm already set up to go. All right. Glad to be back, y'all, this week. Got a couple of interesting topics to talk about. Good evening, Liberty. I'm glad you are here. Surprisingly, one of our conversations didn't become the topic of the night, but my mama gave me one, so I'm sure you'll appreciate my mama sage advice or whatever she thinks. But anyway, glad to be here. Um, got a few things I want to talk about. Update on the week. Week's been pretty good, so I'm thankful and give you some update on some other stuff because I put y'all in all my business anyway. So I think I talked about it a little bit last week, but no, maybe I didn't. So last week I wound up, I told y'all, yeah, we're just gonna get into it. Told y'all I was dealing with alopecia because of stress, right? So I got a little spot going on. And I mentioned that the hair is growing back and all of that stuff, but going to that doctor's office wound up giving me a different perspective on this healing process and all the stuff that we're doing. So the first time I went, it was just, oh yeah, I know you do. So don't worry. And you're gonna appreciate it because it's probably something that you want me to do too. But I'll be trying to not to get into a space where I might be triggered, you know what I mean, and my shadow self shows up, you know what I mean? But we'll talk about it. So I wound up when I first went, it was just me in the lobby. It was just me and the receptionist. So one thing I'm not gonna do if it's just two people sitting in there is sit in there and pretend like I don't see you there. So I started tripping out, having a good time, telling jokes. If you ever been around me in public, you know one thing you definitely gonna do. I'm proud of my plants. It's probably why he's shaking a little bit too, trying to let y'all know that he been growing. Again, it's my black cardinal. But anyway, what was I talking about? Doctor's office. So if anybody's been around me, one thing you know we're gonna do is laugh for sure, for sure. So I made the receptionist laugh, and then when they called me into the back, the assistant or nurse assistant, or I'm not quite sure what she is, but when she calls me into the back, everybody's in the back waiting to see who comes through this door, right? And she was like, "Oh my God, you're so crazy." She was like, "You're so funny," and I was like, "What? Y'all can hear me acting crazy up in the front?" She was like, "Yes, yes." So everybody was waiting to see who was gonna come through this door that was out in the lobby, making the receptionist laugh so much, right? So fast forward to the next time I go, and this time it's a bunch of people in the lobby. So I go in there and act like I got a little bit of sense, like my mama raised me right, right? So I'm out there quiet. I'm just scrolling through my phone, doing what people do when they're just sitting in the lobby waiting for their name to be called. And so the assistant comes out and she calls my name, and I promise you, man, she has the biggest smile on her face. She was so excited. And I was like, oh my God, like it was overwhelming. I was like, oh my God, why are you smiling so big? I'm like, why are you smiling so hard? And I was like, what, you remember me from last time? She was like, yes. And when I got to the office, I mean, back into the little room, she was like, I saw your name on the list of people coming today, and I was so excited, but I was wondering why I didn't hear you. Right. And it was funny because I told her, I was like, y'all had company today, so I ain't act crazy. But it was funny because when I came in the back this time, everybody was smiling. The doctor, it was another assistant back there. Like everybody has this. My friend used to always call it skinning and grinning. Had this old grinning look, so they were excited that I was coming to their office today, which is crazy because I don't want to say it's necessarily a new experience, but it's something. It was more of affirmations that I am getting my energy right. So, I come from that background of working with children. And I've been in situations where children are like that. Like children, like, oh my God, that's Mr. Anthony. We about to have the time of our life. Life is about to get grand. But adults, you have a couple people that be excited. You just don't have the whole group like, oh my God, it's him. So what it wound up really letting me know that this work that's working on my energy is bringing an energy that people actually are excited to be around, that people want to hear what I'm going to say, that people just want to experience whatever it is that is Anthony Howell. Excuse me. I need a little water. So excuse me, that was the update on the alopecia thing, but which is ironic because my mom gonna come up twice in tonight's episode. So I remember, I went to the doctor again, a different doctor. I told y'all I'm on. People think that men don't go to the doctor. They do. There are a bunch of men that do. So I'm on my whirlwind of doctor visits. So I've been having this little popping in my knee. And it's crazy because how I've rationalized it as my constant reminder to never make the decision that I made before. You know what I mean? It's like, for lack of better words, it's my war wound. Purple Heart Love Veteran. Oh man, it's this song that he says that. But anyway, I just rationalized it as my, lack of better words, war room. Just never make the decisions that I did before. So, but that's not a real diagnosis. So I'm not crazy enough to just think that my self-diagnosis is going to be efficient enough no matter how intelligent I am and no matter what my background is. So I actually go to the doctor. So I go to the orthopedic and, they do all these tests and all this stuff, right? And it's funny because she brought me, when they come in, they look at all the x-rays and they say my knee fine. You know what I mean? Everything's all good. She was like, I probably got this little piece of cartilage that pops out, you know what I mean? And she was like, it's probably not gonna get better, but it won't get worse. So you can go on with your life or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Everything's fine. But she said something very interesting. I remember when I was a kid, when you were a kid, I used to get so angry at my mama, so angry, angry enough where, and it didn't even take a spanking or anything like that for me to get this angry. I get so angry at my mama where I be in the room just talking that crazy nonsense about when you gonna get big, right? So let's say if I hit my elbow or something, my elbow hurt. And I would go to my mama and I'd be like, Ma, it hurt when I do this. And every time, like clockwork, this lady would reply, well, don't do that no more. That is not a real answer. My elbow hurts when I do this. She was like, just don't do that no more. So now I'm supposed to just live like this, right? And I used to be so frustrated, right? So when I'm at the orthopedic, I show them what I have to do to make it pop. Like sometimes it'll pop just when I'm living life, but it definitely will pop where you can hear it. Because when I did it in my primary care doctor's office, he was like, wow, right? So I did it for the orthopedic and she was like, wow, because it pops loud. You can hear it pop. But I have to do a deep squat. So as the doctor is telling me that, you know what I mean, everything's fine or whatever, and she wraps it up in a nice little ribbon. It's like, I said, well, it'll pop loud when I do this, and I show her a deep squat. And when it pops, she was like, well, don't do that no more. Deep squats are terrible for your knee. And all I could do was just laugh. Because you know how I said in this healing process or in this life process period, you'll find yourself in the same position, just at a different level. So now that I'm 45, I'm in the same position of someone to tell me, just don't do that. And literally, I know I was getting sage advice from my mama the entire time. So, Baba, I apologize to you for that. You do watch my show. She does watch my show sometimes. She'll come and tell me when she popped in and she's so excited. So, since we talking about my mama, which I do sometimes because, she's a part of my life and the healing process and all of that. So, I was having a conversation with my mom. And I gave her a perspective. As a matter of fact, the conversation we were talking about, I'm going to talk about a little later to use as an example. But her and I were having a conversation, and one thing that she thinks is valuable about me, and other people have told me, because sometimes when it comes from family, like your mother, father, cousin, you feel like that's what they're supposed to say. So I've heard this a bunch, but one thing that she thinks is valuable about my words is my perception or perspective of current events. And she feels like I need to talk about current events. Mama sometimes no. Don't give her extra credit just because you a mama. But she wants me to talk about current events. And as wild as it is, one thing I try not to be is too controversial. I knew you would agree with her. So like I said, one thing I try not to be is too controversial. And her suggestion was for me to start a podcast where I discuss my perception or perspective on current events. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. But yes, I'll take your idea. We in the process of building this ship, this plane while we fly it anyway. So I can use that idea as a panel for the plane. We can have these discussions. But because, I told it is sometimes. When I said the thing about that, you start talking about current events. Them people be in your comments talking about your mama, your granddaddy, and I'm be like, dang, man, my granddaddy ain't do nothing. All he doing is trying to rest in peace. So social media will go crazy and start talking bad about your family. And I'm a Pisces, so I do, as much as they like to say Pisces are emotional, they only talking about the Pisces that lives in the light. We do got a dark side, and my dark side ain't gonna take too many of your mama jokes. And I'm funny. So, but the last thing I need to do is be arguing with people in comments or turn my show into me talking about somebody that says something ignorant in the comments. So I told her, and one thing I wound up having to do is I do agree with her that I do think that I needed to figure out some way, or I need to figure out some way to include current events into this process. So, but for me, I had to do it in a way that was authentic to what I want to do and keep it as minimally controversial as possible. So tonight is going to be one of those attempts, right? So, but the way I plan on doing it is to wrap in something that's about current events into how we can use it as an example to help us in the healing process. So it will definitely not be just me ranting on and off about current events and things like that, and definitely not political. It depends on what it is. So I stay away from politics and religion. And it's funny because when I first started, because this is funny because I just got to this in, within the last year or so. But I have been working on this process for a couple of years. And it was funny because when I first was thinking about starting a podcast, one of my friends, consultant that I work with all the time, and I consider them a friend as well, they called me the Love Doctor. So that's even why the dude Orlando, who was on the show, the one who gave me the Soul Swami name, that's one of the reasons why he even said Soul Swami, because people thought my ideas on relationships were very unique and refreshing once you settle in on them. Because a lot of times my ideas will be very different because I feel like perspectives are like tools. And the more perspectives you have, the more tools you have to address or to face obstacles. You know what I mean? So if you only have one perspective, you're going to get worn out in this world of multiple perspectives. So one thing that has been heavy on my mind and has been kind of crazy over the last couple of weeks in social media is that lady Tessa. I don't even know her last name. I just remember the Tessa thing. The woman who had like 50 shorts on TikTok, and people sat there and listened to those 50 different videos, which I have perspective. So, but she gave her perspective, right? And somewhere along the line, I found the cliff notes. And one of the reasons I didn't have any motivation to listen to the videos or anything is because I seen one of them. And the energy that I was receiving was very unique. And the first thing I thought about that woman, and the more I know about her example, is that she is no victim. She is not a victim at all. But what she does reflect is a person who has not done what they say is the shadow work. So they do not recognize who their shadow self actually is and what they are capable of doing in their shadow self. Right? So how this wound up getting a little deeper into being aware of the shadow self and how she represents an example of a person who does not recognize their shadow self ties into a conversation that we were having in the men's group that I bring up all the time. So in the men's group, we were talking about this idea of love again, right? And a lot of times when people talk about love, we like to say what love wouldn't do. And then we talk about love in all these positive ways and all these positive things and all of that, right? So, but I think one of the main ideas that came out of this conversation is love actually does have two sides. Two sides. Love does exist in the light, and love does exist in the dark. And you have to know your shadow self to know how your love exhibits its dark self, its negative self. And the wild thing about it, if you need an example of it, whenever you're at your lowest, there's somebody there to love you. And if you need an example about that is I firmly believe drug addicts do not have a problem. And specifically, people like crackheads do not have a problem finding romance. It's us normal people that do have a problem finding romance. But the thing about them is they have recognized their shadow self and they find love in the shadows. People who function and live just like them. The problem is like what we said when we talked about last week, the people who approach the infinite game with a finite mentality. So, and so now that we understand that love actually does have two sides, everything in life has two sides, a light and a dark. You know what I mean? A positive and a negative. Whatever you want to mean, whatever you want to think of it is. And one of the other ideas that came out that discussion, sometimes with loving yourself, it becomes fire and, like I said, fire and brimstone, because we love to talk about that. But sometimes you have to, the self-love or love alone will have you blow something up, destroy it. And one of my favorite quotes, which I dropped to them, is, "May the bridges I burn light my way." So love can also be extremely destructive, right? But if we do not recognize these things about ourselves or recognize this about these feelings or these emotions, we will just think that we only exhibit love in the positive light. Like we'll think that we're always this great person. and not recognize that sometimes when we're in a different energy space, our love does show exhibit differently, very much so. So, um, second part, this ties back around to this Tessa idea again. On one, why I say she was no victim. On two, why I say she was just a person that necessarily didn't recognize her shadow self. And I agree with you. It, listen, it did have people in the chokehold, and I couldn't watch because the concept was triggering, what one of the comments say. And the concept was triggering. And we're going to talk about that a little bit too, because that was purposeful, because she does not recognize her shadow self. You hear me? And you know, a lot of times that they say love and relationships are a reflection of you. That man is a reflection of her. She just didn't want to accept that at all, at all. So I remember starting to giving examples on how to give a opposite perspective, because she gave the perspective of her love and the light. And I'm going to show you how she didn't recognize her shadow self, and she was actually giving love in the dark. She was loving in the dark. So I'll never forget, I had a homeboy. And generally, this is probably the girlfriend he has now that he's probably going to try to be with is probably the first girl that he's had that works and has her own place and all of this stuff, right? But I remember years ago when he was married, you know what I mean? His wife didn't work. She blah, blah, blah. But she worked whenever she wanted to, and so forth, right? And I remember after his divorce, he wound up getting another girlfriend who didn't work, been with her for 13 years. And I remember talking to him about this idea of having a woman that live with you and doesn't work. You know what I mean? Because that was something that I kind of agreed in. But again, I was just thinking about love and the positive, right? So my homeboy told me, he said, the reason why I do that is because it gives me all of the control. And when you step back and think about it, if you have someone living in your place that isn't working or minimally working or anything like that, they still wind up having to live by your rules. And it does give you a certain amount of, whether you want to call it control or leverage or responsibility, it puts you in this position to have power, right? And what my homeboy, the reason why he would do that is because of the power. And it's ironically because the same reason why he would do that is one reason why I'd say I never would necessarily move in with a woman, because I didn't want that power over myself. So when I started thinking about those dynamics, and one of the things they don't tell you, it can become somewhat of a power struggle, and you can be on either side of that and not recognize it. So when we think about romance and think about love in the terms of ourselves, it is very much possible that the reason she wanted that man to move in, a man who supposedly had his own place, paying his own bills, was because of power, the control and the leverage it would give her. That's one. So, and then the other thing that she wound up exhibiting is one that I recognized in myself. So it's attachment. So one thing, attachment issues can show up in a lot of different ways. And a lot of times the only way that we recognize attachment issues is with our attachments to other people. But attachment issues can show up with attachments to places, attachments to ideas, attachments to goals. So one thing that I can say that what winds up letting me understand a little bit of her outside of the moving in, let's also add this caveat that she said that the reason why she allowed him to move in was because she was lonely and moved on. Now, we as people know what lonely feels like, right? But we also know there's a certain level of lonely and control and power that allows you to let a stranger move in that fast. There's a therapeutic need underlying someone who will allow someone to move in just because they were lonely. So that means she had a plethora of issues prior to him even showing up. To him even showing up. So back to attachment issues. So I told y'all before one of my attachment issues have been to the feminine, right? And I had this attachment issue with trying to be a hero and savior complex, for real, for real. But one other attachment I had to was this idea of family and marriage. And we've talked a little bit about it before, where I've discussed how one of my issues with marriage and relationships was I was putting the cart before the horse, the two before the one. I'd go into every relationship with the goal of marriage. And the thing how I should be going into a relationship is the goal of a healthy relationship. Then we can move on to step two. You know what I mean? Because if I'm worrying about step three, I might not pay enough attention or might not value to be able to be present enough for step one, step two. So that was my thing with my goal of marriage. And then I also had this goal of a family, right? And we've talked about it a bunch, right? This attachment to this goal and this idea of reaching my goal would allow me to take chances or sacrifices. And it's so funny because when we even talked about my ex, one of the things my homeboy told me that made me okay, because he knew my attachment to this goal was you always wanted a big family anyway. So this attachment to this goal, this idea of family and this idea of marriage wound up allowing me to put myself in a situation that I ain't needed to be in the first place. So as much as I'd like to say that, and it's the truth, so as much as I may have been hurt or anything like that by my previous situation, one thing that I can't necessarily say is I didn't know who she was. I did know who she was, but my attachment to my own goals and my own perceptions and my own possibilities allowed me to not necessarily pay attention to who she was, right? So, for example, I remember one time she told me she fought her ex's mama. I've never in my life had a girl that would think about putting their hands anywhere towards my mama. You know what I mean? Just out of respect for me alone. But I knew she was that type of woman. But because I was attached to this goal, I did not even take that as a red flag. I only looked at love in the light. And I thought of that as a person in a terrible situation who had to protect themselves, right? But it also says a person in that situation who actually fights their mother. We live our lives every day and we don't find ourselves in situations where we have to fight the mother of our ex. And that doesn't mean that the lady didn't cause it or didn't have no response or no fault or any of that. It just goes to show that most of us can live our life and not avoid that. There is something to be said about a person who cannot avoid that, not once, but at least three times. Why would you even? It says something about a person who stays in a situation like that. It says something about a situation like that. But it definitely says they are no victim. So when it comes to give you another example, I remember it's this idea of a friend that also had this idea of family and all of that. And I remember talking to her. She was having issues with her baby daddy, which a lot of people do. You know what I mean? But the ironic thing about that is I remember she told me this story. It was crazy. It was hilarious to me that she had basically air tagged him, so she knew where he was. Called him and talked to him. This fool at a gas station, right? But he done turned on forklift sounds in the car and said he was at work. So when he was talking to her, she could hear forklifts in the background, but she knew he was live. It was crazy. It was one of these dynamics. And I remember when she had what we say that alcoholic moment of clarity. She had one of those very, very honest moments with me. And she said that one of the reasons she's in that situation is because she she thought that she was getting older and she was concerned about not being able to be married and concerned about not having the opportunity to have a children. So she found herself a dude who was suitable to father a child. I mean, to provide his seed, but she definitely didn't require him to be suitable to be a good father in the long run. And for that, she was no victim. She made a very much conscious choice, and unfortunately, she has to deal with the consequences of her choice. So tying back into and then nope, another example, I was talking to another friend and they have a friend that was dating a guy. It's about recognizing your shadow self again. So my friend who recognized her shadow self and said she had that baby from the wrong place. She was from a place of fear. She had to admit that because she recognized herself. But then I have a friend, like I was saying, was telling me about a friend of theirs who has this boyfriend, well, had a boyfriend, and they were having issues. They were engaged to get married or something like that, and they were having issues with having a child. So they chose IVF and they started breaking up and all of this stuff going on. And in the conversations, the woman was fighting for what she saw was as her relationship, right? You know what I mean? Trying to um persuade the man to see the value of the relationship. But the one thing that she kept focusing on was the child that they were going through. You know what I mean? Even to the point that she suggested just having the child anyway. And when I was having this conversation with my friend, um, I gave her a new perspective. The dude did not follow through. You know what I mean? And in the perspective of like Tessa, a person that doesn't necessarily recognize their shadow self, it makes it seem like the dude was a terrible guy. To go all that long to be engaged to this woman, take her halfway through this process, then get closer to the end. And not only was he decided not to go through the process with her, but he also wound up started dating other women. And she would hear conversations that we'd have with other women, and he was at a level of openness with them that he wasn't with her, right? So after my friend tells me this whole story, I said to her, I agree with the man. He shouldn't have had a kid. Because one thing that she didn't say was, I want you. In her whole fight, it was about the idea of having children. She didn't even want that man, which is why I give my friend a little more credence because she recognized her shadow self. She knew she ain't want the man. She knew she wanted the baby. But as my friend, when we're going through this and we don't have knowledge of our shadow self, she didn't even recognize that she didn't even want that man. She wanted the baby to the point that if this man had emotional needs, that she wouldn't even respond to it, which led him to seek his emotional needs to get met by other people. And that's not no justification, but it is to say that we need to recognize our shadow self. And her friend was in a situation where she didn't recognize that she didn't want the baby at all. She didn't want the man at all. And that's what the man didn't follow through on. Because if you're going to make at least a lifetime commitment with somebody, you definitely at least want them to want to know that they actually want you If I'm going to have a baby with a woman, I want to know that woman wants me. And that's a funny thing. It's an ironic thing because I've had more women want children with me than want me to have children with, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So back to this Tessa thing with this idea of how you doing, Smiley? I hope y'all sold all y'all Girl Scout cookies. We are, I don't know if you just joined, but we talking about knowing the good of yourself. Nope, you joined that. You came on at the right. Anytime you come on is the right time, man. You know I appreciate your support. So that's why I was just about to tell you. All we're doing is talking about good. Talking about knowing yourself, the good and the bad, but we're calling it in terms of yourself in the light and yourself in the dark, or your shadow self. And we're using real world examples of how people function when they don't recognize their shadow self. You know what I mean? So I remember earlier I talked about the idea of goals that I was tied to and recognizing how I was functioning in a dark place in my love. I also see that same thing with the Tessa example. But her attachment was also to a goal. And I don't know if I'm naming the correct goal, but one thing that seemed evident and the one thing that she kept on ignoring was finance. So I do believe that she was very much attached to this soft life goal or idea, right? And that soft life idea comes with a bunch of consequences. So, and because she was attached to that, she definitely ignored major signs that this man could not provide the life that she wanted. So underlyingly, she was kind of manipulative too, because she wasn't authentic about why she was there. She heard this man had $750,000 for a down payment for a house. Even though that fell through, she was so attached to that goal of the soft life and him paying the bills that she ignored that a couple of times. And to also manipulate the situation more to have that leverage or that power that we talked about early, she even introduced into a very, very already unhealthy situation just because the man was paying her rent. She was very much too attached to a goal or perspective to ignore all of that. And that, and not recognizing her shadow self, doesn't see how she was being manipulative in this dynamic to try to reach her goal, to try to have the power of her goal. And that's one of the things that the adding the child to that situation did. It was about being able to control the dynamic. Because if the dude don't have the money, maybe that's gonna motivate him to actually show up with the $750,000. But it didn't. And the thing that probably bothers me the most is what a lot of people do when they are unaware of their shadow self, of who they are, right? They tell their stories from a victim standpoint. And that goes back to what one of the comments said earlier. The concept was triggering. It was because most people, I go as far as to say 99% of people have been victimized at some point in their life. So if I tell my story from a victimized standpoint, then it will resonate and create emotions in people that makes them feel as though they connect to my story. And I do that to be purposefully emotional manipulative. The only piece that she ever even tried to really accept accountability is when she said I was lonely. But she moved on from that so far. and did not recognize that she told that purposely to be manipulative and create emotions. And you can see the outcome of that. She's getting all types of rewards from being what we all have been, a victim. You do not get those type of rewards for being a victim. The most we get for being a victim for the most part is memories. And if you actually get something tangible for being a victim, you probably lost something that was way more valuable to you than that tangible thing. You know what I mean? So she's purposely told it from a victimized standpoint to create emotions in people. Put it like this. Imagine had she said, well, listen, I was trying to have this soft life. So I saw this dude who had the money to be able to do it. So I was trying to get him to move in, had a baby bomb and all this shit because he had bread. He had $750,000 put on the house. So if she told that from that perspective or from a truthful perspective, no one would give her any credence because it doesn't resonate. If she told it from a predatorial standpoint, which she very much was, predatorial in that situation. The only problem is he just played the game better. He just outplayed her. That's all. She just lost at her own game. And I hope that she joins us and do some of this healing so she can recognize her shadow self, so her shadow self won't take the lead and have her in those situations. So the last thing, not the last thing. The last thing I'm gonna say about that is all of that is to say, be truthful with yourself. Take some time and acknowledge who you are in the light and who you are in the dark, because both of them exist in you. And if you notice that you're moving from, you find yourself in a victim standpoint a lot, or you find yourself in a victimized position a lot, I definitely would take a little time to think and rationalize if that is also one of your control mechanisms, because there are multiple, and you may have one that you are unaware of. So I hope y'all like that. That was my attempt to curve in current events into this healing process. So yeah, I definitely won't be doing that every show unless something comes up that's stupendous that I want to talk about, but it happens. So, oh man, another conversation that I've been having over this week, and this one is going to be the last one, and I'm going to give you all a little bit of homework. Talking to the same friend. Well, I talked to a bunch of friends, so at one point they just blur in, which is ironic. But anyway, talking to the same friend about the friend who wasn't aware of their shadow self. And they were telling me that they've been reading up on this stuff, or just basically just doing some research on this idea. And the idea is, thank you, Liberty. Now, you know, I had you arguing with me about that already. So sometimes Liberty gets the brunt of my my venting when I decide to share my perspective, because I tell her how I feel all the time, and other people too. If I know you, I tell you my perspective all the time, or in groups, because I make people mad in Facebook groups. They be mad till they understand my method. And if 400 people come in there and say the same thing, why am I going to be 401? I'm going to say something different. Because remember, perspectives are like tools. The more tools you have, the more equipped you are to handle roadblocks. So, but we have been talking about this concept of rich life, not rich life, poor life, or anything, but the concept of how your rich life can look any way you want it to look. It can be any way you want it to look. So a lot of times people always talk about how rich people don't do this or rich people don't do that. No, that's just the only rich people that you're paying attention to. So, like, as far as real estate, one thing that we talked about, because it's always this pressure to buy a house, right? And one of the things that the guy that they were telling me about was saying, and it's something that I said, there's a bunch of rich people that never buy a house, they just lease, right? Is design a rich life that fits yourself. Because the guy who was telling that, he doesn't have a house either. He rents too. And given the benefit of renting and leasing, and as much as we like to say that housing gives you a little more stability, it depends. Depends on where you are and depends on your lifestyle. A person like me who moves a lot, having a house means I'll be selling a house every 5 years. That may not be the best idea, you know what I mean? But what he said, and sometimes renting comes with it's just one price. So if I'm living in here, I rent, and my water heater breaks, I don't got to pay extra for no water heater. I don't have to replace that. My mom, as a matter of fact, my mom had to do some foundation work. $25,000. You know what I don't never have to pay? Well, you know what? Hey, renter never has to pay $25,000 for some foundation work. Now, whether you think that's good or bad, doesn't matter. It's the life that you want for yourself. So if that doesn't necessarily reflect the life that you want for yourself, then it doesn't matter. Create the one you want for yourself. So when I started thinking, when they asked me that, I really had to think about it, because as much as I used to always say, like, I want to be rich, I don't want to be famous. But I never have, like, we always talk about, they talk about, I mean, manifesting, but I do believe putting this stuff into verbalizing it to put it into the ethers, into the atmosphere. I've never actually broken down what my rich life would look like to me. You know what I mean? And then I started thinking about that about a lot of things. And it was funny because we got into the conversation and I was telling them that I think I kind of want to date again. And one of the things that I said, one of my issues is I don't trust. Like, that idea of safety came up again. So as I'm thinking about what my rich life looks like, I'm also thinking about what I want my love life to look like. And it was crazy because as I sat there and thought about it, I really thought about how I didn't know. I could not put into words what I wanted to look like, where I can actually visualize it and what I want it to look like. I mean, normally I just use like general terms, like general things, like I want me a woman that I'm attracted to. You know what I mean? But I still use general things like that, but I'll be a little more specific on the energy and the dynamics I want, right? So ever since then, I've actually been thinking about it. You know what I mean? And it actually has been a exercise of intelligence, for lack of better words, because I really have to think about what I want, especially now that I'm getting into the point that I feel like it's okay to date seriously. And something else I want to low key mention is when you're doing this healing process and you're cleaning out a lot of old energy. I always been talking to you all about how the healing process is a communal thing. You will get to a point where it does seem very lonely. You cleared the space for all this new energy that now there's not anything in that space. So now you have to have the courage to go out and fill that space with new energy that reflects what you want. And that's what this exercise pretty much does for me. Because as much as I talk about how I have all the friends to talk to, or I talk to a lot of people, um, I'm sorry. So listen. Okay, so I'm glad you already jumped on it. I'm laughing because some people know me. And the comment says, I want a love that doesn't wear leather pants. And that's an inside joke. But unfortunately, I got to tell y'all the story somewhat. So it won't be an inside joke. But one of the questions that I am going to ask that's going to be for homework, what are three things you want your love life to look like? And be as specific, get as down to the nitty gritty as possible that you can. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, so and then the other thing is describe what your rich life looks like as well. But this leather pants thing, so I do energy readings. I did an energy reading on Keisha, and you know, I try to promote people to get out here and date. And as wild as it is, she took my advice. I'm always shocked when people take my advice, right? And literally, some dude she met likes to wear leather pants. So I've literally been harassing her since she said that her next love is going to have leather pants. Period. She just said, and literally, she took one of them games that says she gonna be married next year. And here I go being a troll, talking about I smell matching leather suits. So this leather pants thing is crazy between us. So I laughed extra hard when she said she doesn't want to love that she wants a love that doesn't wear leather pants. And it's crazy, which is a perfect example. It's very specific. I don't want to love that wears leather pants. And I realized that because to get more specific, because a lot of times I've gotten exactly what I've asked for. And then I've learned I wasn't specific enough. So if I didn't learn anything else from my previous relationship, I did learn this, that which was a red flag. I should know. One thing she always said is be an informed buyer. Be an informed buyer. So you have to know exactly what you want, exactly who you are, and then actually try to describe that, put that in the words. So this is about as far as I have gotten. For real. So on this idea of, and I'm gonna do the homework with you all too. So on this idea of what I want my rich life to look like, I've only gotten this far. And it's financially secure, which is something I used to always say, right? And that can come in many forms. You know what I mean? So you get a job that makes $100,000 in the right place, you can feel like you're financially secure. But that's not quite what I mean. I didn't necessarily just want to be financially secure. I wanted millions in the bank. I've always said I want to be rich, not famous. I want to be rich. I want to be rich to the point where life is a little easier as far as doing the things that I want, which you know that we're already working on is a struggle. You know what I mean? For a person who was born internationally, I don't do enough international traveling. So I want the financial stability to be able to create the space in my life for me to internationally travel whenever I want. You know what I mean? So for me, and the other thing that I always say, I did like financially secure to the point where I can have a driver. So as much as we talk about stress, one thing that stresses me out is driving because people cannot drive. Literally, driving can be one of the most stressful acts unless you get on one of them nice, quiet straightaways and life is good. But for the most part, if you're driving safely, you're driving to protect your life, and that is at risk every corner you turn, especially when you move to the side of town I move on. These people love to cut you off. Oh my God. Oh my God. So financially secure where I got millions in the bank, I can internationally travel whenever I want and have the space. Because the bad thing about that, a lot of times when we ask for this money, that money comes at a cost, which is one of the reasons why I left my previous field. But once you get that money, you know what you don't have? Time for yourself, time for your family, time for anything else. And I don't want money that requires me to sacrifice my family and time. And then the other thing, when I think about my rich life, is I want to get more into philanthropy. One of the things that I've learned that I said if I could give myself, my younger self, advice was go get the money and donate it. Do not work for places that get the money. Do not work for nonprofit. Do not go on nonprofit path. Go for profit, make all the money you can, and donate to nonprofits. So I definitely, in my rich, stable life, I definitely would want enough where I could just give whatever I want to nonprofits that I deem, to the point where I can open a grant fund for people. Like, I could be one of the people that put money into um Charlotte Merchants. What is that? What's that thing called? Um, Foundation for the Carolinas, because that's just a group of philanthropic companies or people. I want to be on that level. So that's as far as I got. And I'm gonna think some more. So I definitely want you to take some time to think about, what do you want your rich life to look like? And then, as I was thinking about my love life, it's funny how the universe will wind up helping you, because one of my um views was something I seen on social media. A friend posted a list of a ton of things. They had about 10 things, but one that actually just spoke to my spirit and is very important, because I guess it kind of ties into this idea of safe, which is one of my other one, is I don't want to be in relationships, no matter what the relationships, where I'm around people who hurt me. And that is very important, because it doesn't mean that I expect people to never hurt me, because people are human. I'm human. We're gonna make mistakes. Sometimes mistakes hurt, right? But it's very different when you're in an environment where people willfully hurt you, whether they thinking it for a good reason. So, like, for example, when I told y'all at my last job, this lady used to always tell me how she used to pray for a black man like me to get this position, and then in the same breath try to get me fired, which was crazy, crazy. Willfully try to hurt me. Willfully try to hurt me. May spread rumors to the point that she was getting the community not to believe me. And trust me, all these people are eating crow now, because I ain't there. They program struggling. But I don't want to be in situations like that, whether it be work situations or relationship situations. And that includes, because, like we talked about it before, a lot of people, when they don't know how to respond to your emotional needs, they just try to use sex. And as a man, well, in society, we really don't really talk about men's emotional needs. You know what I mean? Or how to express them, or how to deal with them, or any of that. You know what I mean? But I want to be in a situation where a person can respond to my emotional needs, especially when they hurt me. So that was very important for me, to be in a place where I'm around people who don't hurt me, regardless of the relationship. And then the other thing that I got, because we've talked about it a bunch ourselves, um, is that idea of safe. Because it came back around when we was talking about dating, and I want to go back to date, and I mean, taking dating seriously, because right now I'm just out here. You know what I mean? Um, yeah. But the more important things is to make sure that I feel safe in this relationship. And the wild thing about it is, as I told you all, I have to do myself, is I'm going to have to break down safe, because safe is an example of how I would generally describe what I wanted. And I'd say I something like, I want to be safe, like I want a relationship with good communication. Well, what does that look like? What does good communication look like to you? So I am going to have to take time to figure out what safe actually means to me. But I do know that is important in the next phase of whatever is my life, whatever's going on. You know what I mean? Okay, so that was pretty much it. And the homework again. So I want you all, so we can try to make this a little more interactive. Even if somebody's feeling lucky, they want to get on and talk about it. But I do want you all to think about what you want your rich life, 3 things you want your rich life to look like, and 3 things you want your love life to look like. And one rule: leather pants can't be one. Leather pants must be a must in everyone's vision and perspective. Yeah, gotta keep leather pants in there. Okay, so just to wrap up what we talked about, um, be mindful. One, take time to recognize yourself in the light and in the dark. Because even with good intentions, there can be some unsavory perspectives that motivate those good intentions. Um, Definitely recognize your shadow self so you can recognize how you love in the light and the dark. Um, think about your attachments, whether they be to people, whether your attachments are to ideas, whether they are to goals. Make sure that you are aware of your attachments. And gave y'all another example of how you find yourself in the same place, just at a different time. And the example was, don't do that no more. My doctor told me don't take any more deep squats. Just leave deep squats out your life. And lastly is take some time to actually start putting words to your wants and get down as specific as possible to describe each of your wants. And we'll discuss some of those wants again next week. I appreciate y'all joining me. Um, I see y'all Thursday, I believe. Yeah, Thursday's book club. Next week, just reminder, we're gonna be in Savannah. So I probably will this time I have the time. I should. Because Wednesday night they're having a party and nobody invited us to dinner this time. So um I will be mobile streaming though, so YouTube or my Facebook business page or anything like that. But next week we'll be in Savannah for the whole week. See y'all Thursday. Next week in Savannah. Thanks for supporting. Think about those three things, and I'll see you next week. I feel like I need some going away music, like doo 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 doo. Later, everybody.